Okay, just to review. We're talking in this lesson about net income. And we need to define two words. The first one is receipts. And I smile when I talk about that one because when I was growing up, my grandmother called receipts what I now call recipes. I always thought that was funny. But receipts comes from the word received. And that means that you're talking about money that's been collected or taken in or received, such as income. Now that income for you personally is probably money that you take in from a job, or maybe interest on any kind of an account that you have. If you're talking about a business, on the other hand, that's still income, but that income generally comes in as a result of selling something. It's money you receive for either goods or services that you provide, but it's still income. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about ourselves personally or if we're talking about a business, receipts are the same thing. It's income. Outlays are expenses or money that has been spent or paid out. Money that goes out from you or out from the business. For example, in a business that is service-based, it might be wages paid to the employees that work for the company. It might be money paid out for equipment that's used by those employees to provide the service. If it's a manufacturing company, it might be equipment that manufactures a product, and another kind of outlay might be money for some product that you're manufacturing for the materials to make it. For us, outlay is the electric bill, gasoline to get to school, car payments, rent, insurance, and all those kinds of things. When we talk about net income, gross means before you remove anything. We talked about gross income, the income that you take in before you pay taxes. You pay taxes based on your adjusted gross income. But net income is what you have left after you have paid out everything that you need to pay. So it starts out with your receipts, the money you brought in, minus your outlay, the money that you pay out. Now, if that net income is positive, then we call that a surplus. In business, we also call it a profit. It's the net income during a single year. That's the thing to remember, whether we're talking about us as people or we're talking about businesses. It's the net income, usually over the period of a year. Profit is your total surplus, if you're a business. Deficit simply means your net income was negative. You spent more than you took in. Now, hopefully you had some money to back that up. You had some cash reserves. Those cash reserves is money you had from previous to that year, so it doesn't count as income. So hopefully if you do run a deficit, it doesn't mean that you are in debt, that you had to go out and borrow money. A deficit really only means that in one single year, either you borrowed money or you took the money from savings in that year because your expenses exceeded your income. Debt is the total amount of money that you owe to lenders, not for 1 year, but overall, the total amount of money that you are obligated to pay back. And that doesn't matter if it's you as a person, you as a business, or you as the U.S. government. Debt is the total amount of money owed to the lenders, and it may result in accumulating deficits over many years. And I'm sure most of y'all know what the national debt is. That's money that the government is obligated to pay because it has run a deficit for a period of years, and that debt sometimes grows, sometimes it shrinks, depending on how much of the money that we pay back. But debt is the accumulated amount you owe. Deficit is your negative net for a year. So the first example we looked at last time said, suppose your gross income last year was $40,000. Your expenditures, your expenses, your bills were $20,000 for rent and food, $2,000 for interest on your credit cards and your student loans, $6,000 for car expenses. That would be your car insurance, your gas, your car payment, everything related to your car. And then $9,000 for entertainment and miscellaneous expenses. You also paid $8,000 in taxes. Did you have a deficit or a surplus? Well, in order to answer that question, first of all, we need to add up all of the expenditures. This is your outlay. So when we add those up, 20,000 plus 2,000 plus 6,000 plus 9,000 plus 8,000 turned out to be $45,000. But our gross income was $40,000. So when we subtract our expenses or our outlay from our receipts of $40,000, we wind up with a deficit. Meaning that the amount of money that we spent exceeded the amount of money that we took in. Now that is deficit, not debt. That deficit may cause us to have to go into debt because we may have to borrow some more money, but it doesn't necessarily represent debt. We may have had a surplus income the year before and we're spending it. So does this all make sense to you from a budgetary standpoint? This is what you do to set up a budget. Most people can set up a budget. The hard part is sticking to it. Okay. Let's look at a couple more examples. Suppose your after-tax income is $28,000. So that's money you're actually taking in. That's going to be receipts. Now you also have expenses, which represent outlays. You have $8,000 for rent. You have $4,500 for food and household expenses. Excuse me. And you pay $1,600 on interest on credit cards. And then $10,400 for entertainment, travel, and other. So when you add all your outlays up, we have 8,000 plus 4,500 plus 1,600 plus 10,400 means our outlays total $24,500. And then the question that we have is, do you have a surplus or a deficit? Well, since you're talking about net income at this point, your receipts are $28,000. Your outlays are $24,500. And it's receipts minus outlay that tells us what our net is. And since 28,000 is bigger, and it's bigger by $3,500, then we have a surplus. So we're not running a deficit. We actually came out, what we say, in the black. It says next year you expect to get a 2% raise. So that means you're going to make a little more money. But you plan to keep your expenses unchanged. Are you going to be able to pay off $5,200 in credit card debt? Well, what's going to change is our receipts are going to increase by 2%. So that's 100% plus 2% is 102% of last year's income. And the way that we find that then for the next year is going to be multiply 1.02 times our receipts from last year, which was $28,000. So that means our total income is going to be $28,560. Now we're planning on keeping our expenses the same as the year before, so that's $2,400, $24,500. And since we got a raise, but we didn't spend any more, then we have $4,060, which is a surplus. But that surplus is not going to be enough to retire that $5,200 in credit card debt. We might make a good dent in it, but we're not going to be able to pay it off. So the answer is no. And as far as explanation, Our surplus is less than the 5,200 that we wish we had. So it's not that we're running a deficit, we just don't have enough to pay off the credit card. And then Part C says, in Part B, as in Part B, assume you actually get your 2% raise. You actually did get it. If you could limit your expenses to a 1% increase, could you afford a $3,500 wedding? You want to get married and go on your honeymoon, but you don't want to have to pay a lot of money for it. Well, the situation we're in then is that we're going to get the $28,560 as our receipts. But our expenses are going to increase. Not going to stay unchanged like we said before. They actually are going to increase a little bit. They're going to increase by 1%. So that's going to be the same as what we did here, 102% for our increase in our income. It's going to be 101%. Which is 1.01 times our expenses, and our expenses were the $24,500. So let's see what our outlay is going to be. And our outlay is going to be $24,745. So our outlay is still less than our expenses. I'm sorry, our outlay is still less than our receipts. I misspoke there. So 28,500 minus 24,745. Yes, thank you. Go back there and change that 0 to a 6. And we have $3,815 surplus. So since we only want to spend $3,500 on the wedding and the honeymoon, yes, we can afford the wedding and the honeymoon. So we won't have to borrow any more money. So does anybody have any questions about this process? This is probably I hope this is one of the easier things that we've done.
The entire time I was reading these questions, I thought there was a trick I was missing. Something, his income goes up by 2%, going back to the previous lesson, figuring out his income tax. I don't know. I felt like it was going to be tied to the previous lesson, so I panicked.
No, not quite. Okay. Brianna is creating a budget. The expenses that she pays. That's going to be her outlays. She pays monthly $700 for rent, $120 for gas for her car, $140 for health insurance, $75 for auto insurance, $25 for renter's insurance, $110 for her cell phone bill, $100 for utilities, $300 for groceries, and about $250 for entertainment, including eating out. So her outlay is $1,820 per month. And it says, in addition, over the entire year, she spends $12,000 for college expenses, $1,000 on gifts for her family and friends, $1,500 for vacations at spring and winter break, and about $800 on clothes, $600 in gifts to charity. So these are annual expenses. And she spends $15,900 on those. But her monthly income also contributes to that. So let's multiply her monthly income, $1,820 times 12, to get her annual expenses of $21,840. So that means that her total outlay is $37,740. So now we'll talk about her income. Her income consists of monthly after-tax paychecks of about $1,600, and a $3,000 scholarship. And she got that at the beginning of the school year, so she's going to get that once. But annually, she's going to get 12 of these paychecks. So $1,600 times 12. means her income from working is $19,200. And she gets that one single scholarship of $3,000 for the whole year. Which means she has $22,200 in receipts. Find her net income. Is she in debt? Well, her net income is her gross income $22,200 minus her expenses $37,740. So she has a deficit, an annual deficit of $15,540. Now, is she in debt? If she keeps this up, she will be. In fact, she will be very quickly, unless she has some unlimited source of savings somewhere that she's drawing from. So, is she in debt? Not right now. So, not yet. But she is running a deficit. Now, we could talk about whether or not Brianna is doing something smart or if she's being pretty dumb. What's she probably banking on?
Parents.
Either her parents are going to help her out, especially considering she's only getting an after-tax paycheck per month of $1,600. I mean, $1,600, that's gone pretty much before she pays her monthly expenses. So everything else, yeah, she's hurting. But what's she probably counting on? Because it says she's got a scholarship and she's spending $12,000 in tuition.
Her big job.
She's hoping that education is going to pay off and that she'll get a much better than a $1,600 a month job when she's finished. Of course, by the time she finishes, she's probably going to be in debt unless she's getting some help from somewhere else. Just be clear that she was running a deficit. That doesn't mean that she was in debt for that amount of money. We don't know, how that gets paid. In 2014, the overhead for Busy Bees was $18,630. Now, overhead and outlay are the same thing. Overhead is basically defined as the expenses that you have to pay right off the top before you ever start doing any business or making any sales. So overhead is an outlay. So Busy Bee's outlay is $18,630. Now they're going to cut their 2015 spending, their next year's spending, to 95% of their $24,000 or 2014 level. So they're only going to actually continue that outlay for 2015. They're going to spend only 0.95 or 95% of that. So their spending for that year will be less. So that's for 2015. This is 2014. It says if receipts in 2015 were $18,530, what was the net income in 2015? Well, their net is going to be receipts minus outlay. So the receipts, $18,530 minus $17,698.50. They are going to have a surplus. And the surplus is $831.50. And that's for 2015. So the only thing that's new on some of these problems is we're going back to the very first lessons we had and thinking about how do you adjust expenses or income by percentage. And remember, if you're going to spend less, then you're going to multiply it by a number that's less than 100%. If you are going to get a raise, you're going to actually increase above 100% by the amount of the raise. Another example, 2015, the overhead for Dancing Dan's was $35,200. It says, suppose that they cut their 2016 spending to 90% of 2015. So they're cutting, so they're going to multiply by 0.90. So their 2016 spending is going to be $29,250.
Is it 32,500 or
35,200. I think I'm dyslexic. That's going to change this too. Thanks for catching that. So it'd be 31,680. For their 2016 spending. Now, their receipts in 2016 is going to be 29,980. So now we need to talk about their net. So their receipts, 29,980 minus their reduced expenses, 31,680, is going to leave them in the negative. It's going to leave them in the negative by $1,700. So they have a deficit for 2016. Okay? They either needed to take in more or they needed to cut expenses a little bit more. So they would be a balanced budget. Now we're going to apply what we've been talking about to the federal government. Because they are, after all, they take in money and they spend money. And their intake is taxes, although they do have some other sources of income that are not taxes, but generally that's sources of income they have to pay back. In the federal budget, they have something called mandatory outlays. Mandatory means they have to pay. They can't get out of paying. They are, by law, obligated to pay some of these things. These are expenses that are going to be paid automatically unless Congress acts to change them. And if you've listened to the news lately, you know right now they're arguing already about the budget for next year. And Congress is putting up the biggest argument. Most of these are what are called entitlements, which includes Social Security, Medicare, and other payments to individuals. Do not take the word entitlement to be something that someone has an inalienable right to that they didn't provide for themselves. Entitlements actually are things that people are entitled to because they paid for them. They paid for them in taxes. Okay? So it's not like the government is saying, you know, no, this is our money. It is not their money. It is the money that belongs to the people. All the money the government has belongs to the people. And the people pay specifically into Social Security and Medicare because they have specific taxes they pay for both of those. So, yes, they are entitlements because the people that pay for them are entitled to get their money back. Interest on federal debt. That's a big one. Interest on federal debt is also mandatory outlay to keep the government from defaulting on its loans. And as it says here, entitlement is something the law specifically states the conditions under which those individuals are entitled to them. And it's money that those people have paid for. Now, there's also something called discretionary outlays. And those are decided on a year-to-year basis. They cannot get out of these, or at least they're not supposed to get out of those. But on a year-to-year basis, there's only two kinds of discretionary outlay, and it has to be approved by Congress and the President. The first one is defense, basically the military. The second one is non-defense, everything else. Doesn't matter how good, bad, or whatever you think it is, it's either military or non-military. So defense spending and non-defense spending are the only discretion that Congress has and the President has. Those are expenses for education, transportation, housing, international aid, space program, scientific research, everything else the government might fund. Now you might say, well, you know, they could spend a lot less on this. Well, yeah, they can. They can spend less on that, they can spend less on this, they can spend more on this, they could spend less or more on that. Those are all things that they have choices about how much they pay, up to a point. If they spend more for this, that money has to come out of this. If they spend more for any of these, that money has to come out of that. That's the only two categories they are. That's the only ones they have. And those are the only discretion they've got, meaning they can make decisions about those each year. These are supposedly mandatory. By law, they are mandatory. Now we also have a category called publicly held debt. And that's net debt or their marketable debt, and that represents money the government must repay to individuals and institutions that bought treasury bonds. Basically, it's the people loaning their money to the government and expecting to get their money back with interest. So in that sense, the government is acting like a bank of sorts. They use treasury bonds to fund special programs sometimes. We also have something called gross debt. Now, gross debt is the total amount of the money, gross meaning all of it. You might want to kind of relate this to gross income. Gross is that's what gross means, is it's the total debt without reductions or adjustments. Gross debt represents the total amount the government is eventually obligated to repay. It includes both the publicly held debt, which is this first category where people actually loan the government their money and are supposed to get it back, and the money the government owes to its own trust funds. And for example, Social Security is a trust fund. You pay your Social Security taxes. It's supposed to go into a trust fund account. And that's where your Social Security is supposed to come from when you retire. Now, the reason that we get in trouble, to make sure everybody understands the language that you're going to hear in the news, the government borrows from Social Security. They did it a lot. If you go back and check your history books, back in the 1980s, they borrowed a ton from Social Security and used it to fund agencies like the post office and some other programs. The problem is the government is supposed to pay this back, and they haven't. So when you hear the stuff about, oh, Social Security's going broke, Well, not because you're not paying, it's because they borrowed out of it and they didn't put it back.
And, they borrow from other countries and other funds to pay back the debts, and they owe.
Yeah. They're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
Right, that's it.
That's the best way I can think of to put it. You may have heard that expression. They're borrowing from one place to pay off another place, but eventually, and this was a line out of a television program a long time ago, the father asked his daughter, how can you keep on spending money? You know, why don't you have enough money to pay your bills? And she says, because the Amex people won't give me enough money to pay off the Bank Americard people. Okay, it's not supposed to work that way, but apparently the government thinks it works that way too. And we laugh, but it's really not funny. So, okay, for example, in 2014, and this is all real numbers, it's not made up. In 2014, government spending was $8,520 billion. Now, let's suppose, just suppose, that the government cut 2015 spending to 85% of the 2014 levels, which they did. Okay? That means that their spending in 2015 is 8,520, and I'm just going to put a B for billion, times 0.85, which sounds like a big cut, but keep in mind we're talking about billions of dollars. And I don't, oops, it's supposed to be 8.5. And I don't have to put the billion, I can just multiply this part and then add the word billion to the end of my answer. So they cut so that 2015 spending is 7,242 billion. Now it says, suppose receipts in 2015 were $7,980 billion.
What year is that?
2015.
I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, because this is 2014, and 2014 times 0.85 will give us 2015, and this is the 2014.
So the answer is 2015?
Yeah, this is the 2015 spending, okay? So our 2015 receipts were 7,980 billion. Okay? And what we want is we want to find the net income, which works the same way with the government as it does everybody else. That's receipts minus outlay. So their receipts minus their outlay would be $738 billion. And because that's positive, that's a surplus. And that was for 2015. Okay? So this is absolutely no different from the way that we do it for ourselves. Anybody have any questions? Because that pretty much wraps up this lesson.
Is there not a practice for this?
There aren't any practice problems for this one. I could probably put together some for you if you feel like you want some. But at this point, your practice test is what you want to do. Okay? Now, I did check to make sure that it was there, that I hadn't taken it off. The answers to the practice test are actually on the last page of the test that I posted. And I have checked them, and they are all correct. So if you have questions about any of them, ask the question either there on the folder for the practice test, or go out to the discussion board that everybody can participate in and ask the question there. Because regardless of which place you ask it, I'm probably going to answer it so that everybody can see the answer. And that may be out at the discussion board, or it may be in the folder for the practice test, but I'll answer it where everybody can see the answer if you've got questions about anything. But the instructions that I put in there, the Comcast cable company truck has been living on my street apparently for the last 2 weeks. And my internet goes out pretty much 2 or 3 times a day, usually when I'm right in the middle of something. They finally left yesterday, so I hope they're gone for good. But in case they haven't, if you post a question before the test, please send me a message and remind, because that'll go to my phone and I will check I can get it on my phone. And then I can go at least try. And if nothing else, I can probably use my hotspot on my phone to be able to get into Shobi. But if I'm not checking email regularly, I don't get the notices about Shobi if my internet's down. It doesn't update automatically. So please let me know and remind if you have a question. I did change some due dates. And I changed them to what I think is your benefit because I moved them out. So I was going to point those out to you. Your Unit 2.5 materials, your lessons and notes, are due today, tonight actually, at 11:55. Your portfolio, and it looks like I might be, maybe I need to look at something. No, it'll be set to view only on the 14th. So, portfolio 5 and 6 are both due Friday night at 11:55. So you've got a little more time. The reason I did that is because with my internet going up and down, I had all the, and remember I told you I was going to tell you what the payment was going to be for option 3 on the credit card? And then every time I go to post it, it would be down. I'd be sitting on. So I extended the days for y'all to have it, and for anybody that hadn't already gone ahead and picked themselves an amount, I did go in and tell you what amount to use. Now, if you've already worked on it, used a different amount, that's fine, it doesn't matter. Use whatever amount you want to.
It's saying 5 and 6 are locked.
That's what I was afraid of, because I see that little thing there. Let me see. Try now.
Okay, 5 is good, 6 is still locked.
That's okay, I'm working on it right this minute.
Okay.
And let me go ahead and fix 8, because it says it's locked, but it shouldn't be.
And when is 7, 8?
Monday at 11:55. Okay? After the test. That way, if you have questions on 7 and 8, because they kind of refer to previous portfolios, if you have questions on 7 and 8, I can answer those questions for you on Monday after the test. And you'll still have time to work on them. So that's why I moved those out. I need to change 3-1, so.
Did you want us to make corrections to that practice section 1 through 4, or did you want us to just, if we got any of them wrong?
I haven't graded them yet, so if you got them wrong, you want to make corrections, go ahead.
It's
Okay.
locked.
Okay, let me open it up.
The 1 through 4, the NSU practice section 1 through 4.
That she gave us the answers to? No.
Okay, the way it's set right now is the Unit 2 practice sections 1 through 4. You can still edit until Monday at 4 o'clock. I think it's, no, that's Sunday. That's not right. Hang on. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's Sunday, but it shouldn't be 4 o'clock. So you can edit it up till Sunday night. You hateful thing. Okay, yes, it was due Sunday, but that, I'm not gonna pay any attention if it was late. Okay, does anybody have anything else that they want to remind me about or ask me about or check on? Okay, I am going to give you a few minutes break, let's say about 10 minutes. It's 11 minutes after 9, so come back at about 25 after 9, take a short break. And we're going to talk about some of the vocabulary for the next unit. It's not going to be confusing for you. It is really, really just vocabulary. What do these words mean? Okay? But we need to do that so that when we get ready to actually start working on Unit 3, you'll know what those words mean. You'll have the ability, after you've taken the test on Monday, to go home and look through the recording and make sure you're familiar with the language. So if you want to, go ahead to Unit 3.1 and print out the vocabulary sheet. It's 2 pages.
I'm not sure how I got this problem wrong. This was the answer it's supposed to be, and I got that.
It's super easy, like whenever you see Right, yeah, the first one is.
Where I worked it out, see if I can see. It might have something to do with it being capital gains. Yeah, that's adjusted gross. Okay, it's because capital gains taxes are different, because you don't pay any capital gains tax on the first $37,650.
Okay.
So the only thing you pay is this little bit out here, and you only pay 15% on that,
Okay,
okay?
thank you.
Because I messed that up first too.
Yeah, I
And then
forgot about
I kept
that.
thinking, why is this not coming out? And I thought, oh, it's capital gains, let me go look.
Thank you.
Would you care to re-sign the mandates?
I did that with a set of test papers I had one day. I had them in a tote bag, and I didn't realize that I had not latched down the top of my coffee cup. And everybody got their test paper back stained brown. It was awful.
He will not give me that answer. So he will leave it right, he will not get. I don't put mine in like that, I just put mine in there, sit it down slow. I don't put mine in.
Do you want us to print off those letters, vocabulary problems?
Just the vocabulary questions. Now, if you want to print off the vocabulary problems, so you can go ahead and work on them, because I'm gonna expect you to do those on your own, and then we'll go over those next Wednesday.
Fuzzy. They keep you really warm, so. Yeah, guys, don't do it or next week. It's not too bad. Oh, yeah. I think keeping the lights on too. It's just nice. Our computer crashed.
He's got some training, but I was looking at him. So we actually have something that's part of the chapter. Read the chapter, you go through
Okay.
this.
What we're gonna do in this unit is the very bare bones basics of what is done in a probability and statistics course. I mean, we're not doing any probability, which is fine with me because I actually worked as a statistician, and the only thing you need to know about probability is that if it's high, something's likely, and if it's low, it's not likely. But the basic terminology that we're gonna need to talk about is pretty much the same as what I would talk about the first day in that class, which is why I'm using the PowerPoint that I used to teach that class. Now, I'm not going to show you every single slide, and I don't expect you necessarily to take any notes, because if you printed these out, other than highlighting some of these, you probably don't need to write down a single thing. What I want to do is talk to you about the vocabulary and make sure that you have some illustrations of what some of this is, because this is a different set of language. Now, I'll be skipping over some of these, so if you see me skip over one, don't worry about it. If you want me to put the PowerPoint out there where you can look at it, I will, but what's on the handout you've got is pretty much exactly the same as what's on the PowerPoint. It just lets me have a way to keep up with talking about it. Now, this is not on your handout. I just want you to have a sense of what this is. Data is collections of observations, things that you observe. For example, if I wanted to know how many rulers are in my box up here, I would observe that there are 2. And my data would be that I have 2 rulers. The number 2 describes how many rulers there are in there. If I wanted to say how many whiteboard markers there were, I would say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that observation in that sense means you look at it and figure out what its value is. It may not be how many, it might be what color markers are in there. How many red ones, how many green ones, how many purple ones, how many yellow ones. I might observe my class and count the number of people that fit the physiological genders. How many males and how many females do we have? Or it might be survey responses. I might give you a survey to ask you how how did you think the lesson for Unit 2, were they clear? I could ask you, do you agree or disagree that I understood everything? I could get survey responses. Data is basically just something that you're gathering information. It is basically information. But it is information that you gather by observing something. The reason that we're going to do this lesson on the fundamentals of statistics is because you will run across statistics in everyday life. You don't necessarily need a statistics course, but you do need to understand what some of the words mean. Statistics is defined as the science of collecting, organizing, and interpreting data, which is why I wanted to explain to you what data was. And then what you do is you basically plan studies and experiments to get that data, and then you organize and summarize and you present the analysis of what you figured out and interpret it from looking at that data. And ultimately in statistics you draw conclusions. But the definition that you have is, a lot shorter than this and a lot more precise actually. It's the science of collecting, organizing, and interpreting data, basically. And it also, the data have to describe or summarize something that you're interested in studying. The population is the whole set of people, all of the individuals, all of the test scores, all of the measurements that I want to study. A parameter is a numerical measurement that describes some characteristic of that population. For example, if I were interested in the average age of the summer 2017 student body, everybody that's taking classes at Northeast State in summer of 2017, then my whole population is every student that's signed up for classes right now, okay? And the way that I could find their ages is I might go over and look at the student records, or I might use our data analysis and get them to feed me that data. That data for those students' ages is called a parameter. It comes from the population. They both start with P. So a measurement of something in a population, like an age or a GPA, lots of things I could collect, those are called parameters, measurements that came from a population. Now the problem is, the collection is a population. It's complete in the sense that it includes everybody that's in school summer 2017 at Northeast State. Some of those people are at the King Sports Center for Higher Education. Some of those people are in Mountain City. Some of those people are in Johnson City. Some of those people are in Bristol. Some of those people are out in Gray. Some of them are in Elizabethton. If I wanted to ask a particular question to those students, maybe not get their age, because I could get that without talking to them, but maybe I needed to actually ask them, what kind of additional help do you think it would be good to have for students to allow them to be more successful in their classes? Well, it would be hard for me to talk to every single student, even just for summer 2017. I would have to have a lot of money for gas. I would have to go, a lot of different campuses. It would be time consuming. It would be expensive. So the problem with a population is it's really hard to get information about the whole population. And for that reason, we normally take a subset of that population, which is called a sample. Don't worry about what that word census means. Census means if I were to get the data from everybody in the population. And the government does a census every 10 years, and they do try very hard to talk to every single person living in the United States. It's kind of hard to get the people living under a bridge or, that are unfortunately displaced and they're living in their car. I mean, there's a lot, and service members, they're overseas. It's kind of hard to get to them sometimes too. I mean, you don't want to go out on the battlefield in Afghanistan and talk to a soldier. So most of the time we have to make do with something called a sample, which is just a subset, some of the population members, okay? If we use that sample information, we get something called statistics. Statistics are some characteristic of the sample that we hope represents that population. So for that reason, the whole idea behind statistics is to use sample data to come to some conclusion about what's going on with the whole entire population. For example, if I wanted to talk about math students on the Bluntville campus, summer 2017, I might consider you a good subset. So I might talk to you about the math classes this summer. So the key there to remember is that a sample gives us statistics, a population gives us parameters. The numerical measurement is the same for both. It just depends on where it came from. And here's an example so that we can figure out what this is, because you're going to need to do an example too when you get done. And somebody watch time for me because my clock has disappeared on the computer. So if it gets to be, a couple of minutes for 10, say, hey, you're done. Suppose a farmer wants to learn about the weight of his green bean crop. Well, he didn't want to go out and pick all of his green beans. You know, that's pretty drastic. Some of them might not be ready yet. So what he might do is he might go out and pick 200 of his plants and measure the weight of the green beans on those 200 plants. That way he hasn't picked them all, but he can judge from them, okay, what does my entire crop weigh this week? So in this case, what's the population he's interested in?
Green bean crop.
Yeah, his whole entire green bean crop, every single one of those plants, right? What was his sample? The 200 that he actually picked the beans off of. Okay? So you want to be able to figure out the population and the sample from a scenario that you're given. Suppose a doctor wants to determine the average weights of his 3-year-old patients. So he selects 52 of those patients and he records their heights. How would you describe the population he's interested in? Yeah, but it's all of his 3-year-old patients, not just a few, but he wants all of them. So what is the sample then? The 52 that he actually recorded their heights. In a recent survey, 2,490 adults in the United States were asked if they check their email account at least once a day, and 48% of those adults said yes. Who's the population?
Bills.
Be very specific now. If it's adults, is it adults?
All adults in the United States.
All adults in the United States. We have to be very specific because it doesn't include the children, so we have to say all the adults. And it has to be limited to the adults in the United States. We're not interested in whether the Canadians or the Mexicans check theirs. We want to know if you're in the United States, do you check it? Okay? What was the sample? 48% of the people that actually answered in this case. The people, actually the 48% are the ones that said yes.
2490.
It's actually all of the adults that we asked. Now, did we ask all the adults in the United States? No, we only asked 2,490 of them. And the question we asked them, they answered yes to. So is 48% a parameter or a statistic? It's a statistic because it didn't come from the whole population, it came from the sample. I think we're actually going to talk about this, but I'm going to come back to it. Actually, let's just go ahead since it's already up here. Types of data. This is on the bottom of the second page. There's two types of data. Quantitative means you counted or you measured it in some way. It means that you assigned a number to each one of your data values by using some kind of a method, either counting it or taking a ruler and measuring it or looking at a calendar and seeing how many days it was. Then there's another kind of measurement that is called qualitative or categorical data. Qualitative data doesn't count or measure anything. You observe the characteristic, but it isn't a numerical characteristic. It's something like eye color or gender or what color shirt someone's wearing or whether or not they have sunglasses, whether they're freshman or sophomore. Those are not things that you determine numerically. You just look at it and say, okay, you fit into this category, this category, this category. Okay? So remember that quantitative, think quantity, that's numbers. The weights of supermodels or the ages of the respondents to some survey. That would be quantitative. Categorical data might be the genders of athletes or the shirt numbers on their uniform. Now, notice I said number. The number on that athlete's uniform, does that indicate anything about the player being better or worse than another player because it's a number? What's it a substitute for?
Their name.
Their name, that's all it is. And their name is just equality. Try these out with me. Gender is quantitative, and we're gonna use qualitative. We're not gonna use the word categorical, although that means the same thing. Gender is quantitative, qualitative. Qualitative. Temperature, quantitative, because we use thermometer and measure it. Eye color, qualitative. Zip code, what is it? Yeah, it's qualitative, because what is it representing? Just, yeah, it's not really, my zip code is 37690. Who has a zip code higher than mine? Anybody? 37690. Johnson City's is 376, well, one of Johnson City's is 37601. My zip code's higher than theirs. Does that mean I live in a bigger town? Lord, no. I live in a Bowman town, there's probably about 30 of us. Okay? So zip codes, are they really measuring? I mean, they're numbers, yes, but are they measuring something? No. So that makes them qualitative. Numbers are not, numbers can be deceptive. You have to ask yourself, okay, what's that number being used for? Is it actually a measurement of something, or is it just a label? Like cell phone. Is your cell phone number qualitative or quantitative? It's qualitative, which is the name for your cell phone, okay? Average salary of a faculty member at Northeast State. Quantitative. This is how much money these people make. The number of days during the past week a college student has worked. Quantitative. Social Security number. Qualitative, because it's a substitute for your name. The heights of males. Quantitative. You have to measure them to determine how tall they are. The number of times a 2 is observed after you roll a die 15 times. Yeah, because you're counting how many 2s did you get, okay? We are not going to talk about discrete and continuous. I don't think we talk about levels of measurement either. We do not. Okay. This is actually information about types of studies, which is at the top of the second page. What these are is we're talking about the basics of collecting that data we talked about, and typically we get data from two different sources, something called observational studies, and the other one is called an experiment. An observational study is just you observe the measurements and the characteristics. You don't attempt to modify them. You don't give somebody a pre-test and then teach them how to do something and then give them a post-test to see if they learned it. You don't take someone's temperature, give them a drug to see if it reduces it, and then take their temperature again and see if it actually went down. What you do is you just watch. You just observe. You talk to the person. How many? What color? What is your marital status? How many children did you have? So you're just asking questions. You don't actually do anything to change them. In an experiment, you actually do something to them. You usually will treat people by dividing them up into two groups. For example, if I had 2 Math 10 and 10 classes, and I wanted to see which teaching method worked better, then I might teach this class one certain way, you know, maybe it's the way that I'm teaching it right now, and then I have another group of Math 1010 students, and I have them watch the recordings, and then we just work problems in class, and I don't do any explaining or any lecturing at all. And I want to see which one's better. What I might do is I might test both groups at the beginning, treat them differently, and then give you the same test at the end and see which class scores higher on the test. So I've done something that's different. So basically what yours says, the treatment group receives the experimental treatment and the control group doesn't. In that case, you're talking about something that might be like a medical study. You get a group of 100 people that volunteer that have been newly diagnosed with high blood pressure. And you have a drug that you want to see if it actually improves their blood pressure control. So you randomly divide that 100 people into two groups, and you give them both a little red pill. But one little red pill is the actual drug, and the other little red pill doesn't have anything in it. It's basically a sugar pill. It's called a placebo. And then you measure the blood pressure for both groups and see if the ones that got the drug, if their blood pressure actually went down. That's what it means to apply treatment and then observe its effect on the subjects. You have a treatment group and a control group. Now the control group got what's called a placebo. That's on your sheet too. It lacks the active ingredient. Okay? It's just basically completely harmless. The thing is, if I put everybody in that study, everybody has high blood pressure, everybody gets a little red pill. The people that have high blood pressure and get the little red pill that doesn't have anything in it think they're getting the real thing. They don't know. What might happen? Their blood pressure might go down too, because they think they're being treated. And the fact they're being treated makes them feel calmer and less stressed out, so their blood pressure might go down too. That's called the placebo effect. It's not the effect of the drug, it's the effect that someone had thinking they got the drug. And the way you would do something like that is you keep the people themselves in the dark about who really got the treatment and who didn't. They don't know. But if you do something called, and that's called blinding the study. That means nobody in there knows what they actually got. Did they get the real thing or did they get a sugar pill? But if you really want to be very careful about the observations, you also don't let the people administering the treatment know which one they're giving. They're basically giving it to all the people without knowing who's getting the placebo and who's getting the real thing. That's called double blind. So single blind is when the participants don't know which group they're in, but the people that administer the treatment know. Double blind, nobody knows. There's somebody outside it that has nothing to do with the actual treatment. They have a list of the people that says yes, they're getting the drug, or no, they're not, but they're not administering the drug. Okay. Types of sampling. What time is it? 9:48. Okay, we'll be able to finish this. There are different kinds of samples. And this is on the bottom of your first page. We're going to basically talk about random samples, systematic samples, convenient samples, cluster samples, and how they're alike and how they're different. Something called a simple random sample is a sample that every sample of a particular size, every sample of 15, has the same likelihood of being chosen as any other sample of 15. Basically, it's not supposed to be biased at all, it's completely random. The problem with random samples is it's hard to take them. It's hard to be completely unbiased. First of all, if you know the size of the population and you know the size of the sample, and you want to be sure that you get a random sample of the population, that means you have to kind of round it up somewhere before you take the sample, which kind of defeats the purpose of taking the sample because you got the whole population at that point. Okay, so realistically, simple random samples we don't very often get. Systematic sampling is a little bit different. You still have to have the whole population or access to the information about the whole population. I call systematic sampling file cabinet sampling because over in the admissions office, well, not now, but there used to be huge rows and rows and rows and rows of file cabinets where a file for every single student at Northeast State was kept. So that if I, as a person, as a statistician, wanted to go over there and get some data about Northeast State students, I could go and have access to those filing cabinets. Now, do you think I want to go through every one of those files? Even though I've got them all together and corralled up, that would take a long time. So what I would probably do is I would randomly, I would look and I'd say, okay, there's 50 file cabinets in here. So I'd randomly choose a number between 1 and 50, and I would go to that filing cabinet. And I have a random number generator on my calculator that will randomly pick the number for me so that I don't kind of influence it by saying, I want to start here because it's closest. It'll actually randomly pick, maybe say the 28th filing cabinet. So I'll go find the 28th filing cabinet. And then I'll look at that filing cabinet and notice that all the filing cabinets have 4 drawers. So then I'll randomly choose a number between 1 and 4, let's say 2. And again, my calculator will choose that number for me. So I'm going to open the second drawer. And then I'm going to actually count how many are in that drawer to get an idea of how many are in each drawer, because they probably all have about the same number in them. And then I'm going to randomly choose, let's say there's 75 files in that drawer. Then I'll randomly choose a number between 1 and 75. And I'll count. Let's say the number that it gave me was 38. So I'll count to the 38th file. I'll take that file out and lay it down. And then I will count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If I go past the end of the filing cabinet, I'll come back to the front of the drawer and take the 38th one after that and lay it down. And then do it maybe one more time and take the 38th one after that to be sure that I've gone through all the files in the drawer and lay it down. And then I'll take 3 from every drawer after that, starting at the first. The next drawer down, I'll open it, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 till I get to the 38th one, take it out and add it to my pile. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 till I get to the 38th one and take it out and keep that one. And I'll go through every file cabinet in there, but I won't have to do every file. I'll just flip through and take probably about 3 files out of each drawer. Now, that is a relatively random way to do it. And that's what this is saying, is if you've got the whole population and you only want to take part of them, take every third one. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then I would take the next one. Okay? That's pretty random. But the thing is, you need to have a random starting point as well. That's what makes it random. So this is kind of a pretty good random sample. It's just not a simple random sample. A convenient sample consists of whoever's close by, whoever's easy to get to. Like if I used you to represent all the students at Northeast State for summer 2017, you are not a random sample. You're not a simple random sample. Even if I try to use you only to represent students that are coming to the main campus on Monday and Wednesday, you're still not a random sample because y'all are all here for a common purpose. You're here to take this particular class, which means you have probably more than one thing in common. You may have a major in common because this class applies to certain majors. So that's not random. Think about this. She's just looking out the window. She wants to do a survey on, whether or not people believe in the death penalty. So she hangs her head out the window and asks the first guy going by if he does.
She might be talking to the dog.
She might get a better opinion. But is her sample gonna likely be representative of whatever group it is she's studying? Not unless it's guys walking past her apartment building and walking their dog, probably not. So, convenience samples are easy to take. I call them a Walmart sample. Because basically, if I wanted to know how many people in Johnson City smoked, if I go to Walmart and I stand in front of the door with a clipboard, I can ask everybody who goes through that door, do they smoke? Or I can ask every 10th person that goes through the door, do you smoke? Yes or no? What's the problem with that?
That's only based on the number of people that go to Walmart or the number of people that will talk to you.
Only the number of people that are willing to talk to me, only the ones that went to Walmart, not Target or Sam's or someplace else. Okay, suppose I want to limit it to Walmart shoppers. That's my population, Walmart shoppers. Does my way work any better?
Some people won't talk to you.
Some people still won't talk to me. What's the one thing you know about every Walmart you've ever been to? How many ways are there to get in? At least 2, sometimes 3 or 4, sometimes 5. Depends on the size of the Walmart. I'm only getting the ones that came through that door. Okay, that's one limit. Am I necessarily getting only people that live in Johnson City going to that Walmart? You ever been through a Walmart parking lot? I've seen people with Hawaii tags.
How'd you drive here?
Yeah, I've always wondered that because I've seen in the Walmart parking lot in Johnson City tags from Hawaii, Alaska, and I'm thinking, how did you get that car here? And do you not have a Walmart at home? What's wrong with you? So I'm not even limiting myself to the population of Walmart shoppers in Johnson City.
4 minutes.
Okay, so I'll wrap this one up by saying the bad thing about convenience sampling is they're useless. It doesn't represent anything about anybody that you even want to know about. It's just that they're easy to take, so they're useless. The other 2 methods are stratified, which means I divide you into 2 groups. Wouldn't be a good idea in here because I've got 2 guys and all the rest of the ladies. So I would have to randomly pick one of the guys and about half the girls. But that's basically a stratified sample. You divide them into the group, and then you pick some from each group. Its cousin is cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is you divide it into groups, but you take all of some of the groups. Cluster is all of some. Stratified is some of all. Okay? And I will repeat that the next time. That pretty much gets you through all of this except types of statistics. We will take care of that on Wednesday next week. If you have questions on the test, the practice test, anything else, please do back up your questions in Remind. I don't want to miss a question just because the cable guy came back.
On the test, said the tax rates,
Yes, I will give you the tax code, the 2016 tax code, including your way that you do taxes on capital gains and FICA, and both the kinds of FICA taxes. So we don't need to do that. You don't need to put that on your card. You save your card for definitions that you might forget.
What about that little table with the annual and quarterly? Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, you want that too.
You're gonna give that to us?
Yeah, I'll give you the tables, the information I'm giving you in tables, I will give you. Okay. Okay? In fact, I'll probably go ahead and post it out there so you'll know what you said. I'll put it on the sample test.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good week, good rest of the day.